Right, guys, welcome. There's two classes here, so we've got the level 6 and level 4s. We're very lucky today to have, well, two guest speakers. Gary Haigh is the MD of SAB, and Mario Cosido, who's the brand manager of Peroni, so they're obviously the same company. But we're going to be talking about, I think we're talking about Peroni Nastro Azzurro, which is one of their flagship brands. So I'll hand it over to Gary.
Oh, great. Okay. Hi. Okay, listen, I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about myself as a sort of prequel to Marianne, who's going to take you through the brand story. So I sort of checked with Greg and I said, look, I'm probably not on strategy for whatever this session's supposed to be. But as I think about some of the companies I've worked with, there's actually been some quite important marketing learnings that I've had in each company. And I thought I'd share those with you because I guess it sort of shaped me as initially a marketeer and then ultimately, I guess, a managing director. So why don't I just kick on? The first company I worked for when I finished university was a company which I'm sure many of you know, Procter & Gamble. That was up in Newcastle. And it was there that I joined as a brand assistant. Worked my way up to a kind of brand manager. I was there for 5 years, and the brand that I worked on was Fairy Liquid, which is a kind of an iconic UK brand I'm sure many of you know. And the one thing that I took out of working at Procter & Gamble, which I thought was interesting, was the importance of data. And I've got to be honest, I kind of did a degree in English literature at university, and I got into marketing, and I thought marketing is all about just kind of flair, imagination, it's fun, it's creative, it's artistic, etc. And Procter & Gamble was a really good place for me to have those kind of wild fancies disabused. Because the focus that Procter & Gamble puts on getting data to understand your consumers and your customers, so that would be the retailers, how they shop and what their habits are, is actually second to none. At times it can be quite frustrating because it does take quite a bit of the magic out, but it certainly made me understand that having an idea or having a hunch in many instances isn't good enough, particularly if you're going to be putting many, many millions of pounds or dollars behind an idea. So Procter & Gamble, the importance of data within marketing. I then moved to Pepsi-Cola. And I actually worked in Pepsi-Cola out in Eastern Europe in the early 90s, so just after the Berlin Wall had come down. And at that time, there were very few what we would call kind of Western brands available in Eastern Europe. And the importance of speed was what I took out of the 5 years that I did in Pepsi. Because essentially, what happened in Eastern Europe was across the period from 1990 to about 1996, that market evolved at kind of 5 or 6 or 7 times the speed that the market had evolved in the UK. So brands, the kind of brand maturity lifetime cycle was massively compressed. And simply getting stuff out there and doing stuff quickly and impactfully and executing excellently was actually worth many, many share points. And so I've come from Procter & Gamble in the UK, where we talked a lot about data. And we then moved to sort of Pepsi in Eastern Europe, where data was hard to come by, but what little data you had, you almost had to make decisions instantaneously and just get stuff out there. So it was quite an interesting balance for me, having on the one hand this rather cerebral place, Procter & Gamble, and then moving to Pepsi in Eastern Europe, where speed is actually a competitive advantage. So speed, Pepsi-Cola. I then came back to the UK and I had a couple of years working for Pizza Hut as marketing director of Pizza Hut. And actually, marketing in the retail environment is very different from marketing in the brand environment. We're going to talk a bit about brand today. And what I learned in Pizza Hut was the importance of detail. And you often hear that kind of platitude, I'm sure, which is kind of retail is detail. Never more so than when you're trying to do retail marketing. At the the time we had kind of 500 units, restaurants, across the UK. And one of the things you quickly learn is, God, they're all different. And I kept getting tripped up in board meetings all the time by the rather mischievous operations director. So I'd come up with a poster, with, say for a new meal deal, and I'd say, this is the poster we're going to send out to all the restaurants. I think it looks great, Mark, what do you think? He said, it looks great. He said, how's it going to work in Cheltenham 1? 2 restaurants in Cheltenham, Cheltenham 1. It's going to work just fine, isn't it, Mark? I said, no, it's not, Gary. You don't even know Cheltenham 1. And Cheltenham 1 is a restaurant which is about 3 times the size of this room, and it's got windows everywhere. And sending one poster to a restaurant that's got a square footage of windows of about 2,500 square feet is pretty ineffective. So what I learned there was the importance of detail and knowing exactly what you're working with. I still can remember actually that the only Pizza Hut with an outside children's play area is Bristol 4. Okay? Isn't that bizarre? I then moved to Diageo, and I think the important thing at Diageo was learning the value of premiumisation. I think Marianne will touch on that a little bit in her presentation. Because up to then I've been working pretty much with mainstream brands, and Diageo, as many of you know, kind of focus a lot on spirits. And the thing which is quite exciting about spirits is the incredible growth at the moment in the top end of the market. And Diageo, I think, were very good at identifying that very early on. It's something, it's a kind of, it's a theme that we're seeing now across many, many categories, particularly, say, for example, in retail, where you've got growth of Waitrose, M&S, Ocado, but at the same time you're getting tremendous growth from Aldi's and Lidl's, and you're getting the compressed mainstream, and you're getting premiumisation, but also value seeking. And Diageo was the first place I worked where I understood that kind of being quite bold on pricing, as long as you had a good product, was something which actually consumers would be prepared to follow you on. And then finally, I ended up at SAB Miller, and I've had the privilege actually to be associated with the Peroni brand. And I think the thing that this has taught me, which I'd always kind of suspected, but it's really, you know, to me in sort of stark reality, is the critical importance of brand consistency within marketing. And why is that good? It's such an obvious thing to say, but I tell you, out there in the marketplace, it's so often not followed. So often you get brand managers or marketing managers who want to play with the brand positioning, who feel there's some flaw in there or there's a wrinkle in what we're saying to consumers, so let's go back and see whether we're correctly positioned. And as I think about all the brands that I've worked on over the sort of 30 years I've just compressed for you, the brands that were the easiest to work on and the brands that were the most successful were the ones that had the most consistent positioning. And consistency is good for many, many reasons. It's good for your consumers because they begin to understand the brand and they have a familiarity with it. And to be honest, consumers' impressions of brands evolve over a relatively slow time compared to how frequently we think about them. I mean, Marianne and I never stop thinking about Peroni, but for a consumer it might occupy a fleeting half second of a day. So we often get bored with brand positionings much quicker than consumers. It helps our customers, so customers for me would be people like Tesco, or it would be people like Mitchells & Butler, or Young's Pubs, because they begin to understand what it is we're trying to do with the brand. I think it helps us actually, as brand owners, because we can talk a common language, and when I'm talking about what I think Peroni should be doing, I'm pretty confident that Marianne starts in the same place. I do hope so. And I think that helps you. And the other people who I think it helps are your agencies. So working with your ad agencies, your marketing agencies, I consistently, sorry, I shouldn't use that word, I always see the best work coming out of brands that have been marketed consistently. Because it means whoever's working on the brand, whether it's a sales promotion agency, advertising agency, DM agency, digital agency, they can sort of get straight on with the work as opposed to trying to understand what exactly this brand's about. And so you're able to put a lot more energy into execution. And at the end of the day, marketing is about execution. It's about what we put in front of the consumer. And spending more time focusing on the excellence of the execution versus talking about the brand positioning, I think makes you more effective in the marketplace. And the other thing you do, of course, self-evident, but you amplify through repetition. And those brands which I've worked on which have really been the toughest and the least effective have been the ones we've been chopping and changing on, because you're actually getting no amplification. And the ones which have really flown are the ones where you've been consistent, because you get much, much more value out of what you do by repeating the themes that you've put out there before than you do obviously when you're changing things. So that's kind of my career. So Procter & Gamble, data. Pepsi, speed. Pizza Hut, detail. Diageo, premiumization. And SAB, and what Marianne's going to talk about, brand consistency. So if I have one plea to all of you, when you get out there, please just don't change the brand for the sake of it. Thank you. Marianne.
Hello everyone. So Gary said today I'm just going to take you through Peroni Nastro Zero and spend about 25 minutes taking you through a little bit of our